Good morning, guys, and welcome back. I want to show you something that I learned about using those very thin molds like this one that you normally find in the baking department of the craft store. So I'm just showing you here how easy this is. This is about 24 hours after this dried, but you could never do this with air dry clay. It would snap and break and get stuck in there. And look at how flexible this is. So let me get started with the video. It's not a decoupage video per se, but how to add to your decoupage and what you need to do with these clay pieces. So these are a few of the different molds, and you can see some of them are thin, some of them are quite ornate, some of them are thicker, and I mean when you look at them from the side, they're thick. This one's very flimsy, and these all can be used over your decoupage projects, but I want to show you which clays to use and when to use them and how to use them properly. So here's an example of a pretty ornate, small, kind of on the thin side mold. And did you know that you can use hot glue in these molds? Now you see, if you'll notice, the tip of this glue gun is fine. I will have a link to this down below because you want to move the tip of the glue gun into these points here. Now this is about as small as I would go of a pattern. In other words, I would not do this on the lace pattern. That requires a different product. But the best thing about using the hot glue gun is that you can use this almost immediately on your project. So this may dry in about, it's probably completely dry in about 5 minutes. You can take it right out. It's very flexible. It lasts forever. You can paint it and you're ready to go. So that is a huge bonus to using hot glue, and you would want to use hot glue. I myself, when I'm making videos, I've got to use the hot glue because I've got to keep moving. I don't normally have a whole day or 24 hours to wait and then come back and finish the video. So that's when you would want to use hot glue. And you can also use it in larger molds, and you can see this is a pretty ornate mold. There's a lot going on with this. So once this dries, and again it dries pretty quickly, you can just simply peel it out, and you see the difference in the color. It now turns to a kind of a milky color rather than the clear. And you may have a little bit of a learning curve with this, but if you've got any loose ends, you can certainly tear those off or cut them off. Or once you feel comfortable with using the hot glue gun, you can also take that edge of the glue gun and move it around the outside like this to smooth down any of those areas that need to be smoothed out. And I'll show you how to paint this in a moment too. This is the same mold, but I'm using some cornstarch here because now I'm going to use the DAS, D-A-S, air dry clay. You can get this DAS clay anywhere in craft stores, in art supply stores. You can get it in my link down below. I'm not making anything off of selling DAS, except through my Amazon store. But I don't work for DAS or anything. It's just a very good sturdy clay. It does not crack. Now, one of the disadvantages to using a harder air dry clay is you've got to let it dry, which takes a while, and normally hours to dry, sometimes overnight. And once you're done with it, it's firm. What you just saw was I was putting cornstarch in here because it helps the clay to come out, and you just probably know how to do this. Now this is an IOD mold, and the IOD molds have a rim going around them which really helps you to feel what you're doing when you can't see it too well. So you just push the clay up to those rims that you can then just go around the outside like I'm doing right here to remove any of the excess. You can then take a tool like this and you just scrape the top surface off there. Now I took a little too much off, so I actually have a plastic tool that works much better, and I'll have, if I can find it on Amazon, I'll put a link down below for the plastic tool. It tends to work a little bit better with this. Now once I have this looking the way I want it to, I put it in the freezer for about 20 minutes. Then when you take it out, it tends to pop right out, because I've found that sometimes when you try to take the clay out, if you don't freeze it, you can pull a little too hard, you can mess it up a little bit, and it can totally mess up the clay and you have to start all over again. So here's the mold. Now I just took it out of the freezer, and I suppose what it does is it freezes the clay a little bit, but you can see how well defined this clay piece comes out. This is also still flexible because it's not completely dry. Now if you don't need to use these on a rounded surface, let's say you're putting them over a box or some type of a flat surface, you're fine with them the way they are. You need to let them dry. I normally let mine dry overnight, like I will work on these the day before. But let's say you do need to use this over a bottle or a rounded shape. What I'll do is I will take the bottle or jar or whatever container it is that I'm working on, and I will wrap the piece around it, or try to fit it around the surface, and leave it to dry that way overnight. Because tomorrow, when this is hard, you won't be able to mold it. Right now, you can mold it, you can let it dry like this, and then you can glue it or attach it in whatever way you prefer. So because this is not a DIY video on how to decoupage, I am going to decoupage, but I'm going to do this pretty quickly, more so because I want to show you how I'm using this mold. This is the hot glue piece, and I still haven't gotten to the best part where you can use the very thin molds for baking. And you can probably tell that I painted these hot glue pieces so you can see how they look. Now here I'm just separating the napkin. I want to make sure it fits over my jar. I spray painted that jar with some flat white paint. It was just a clear glass spaghetti jar after I had cleaned it out. And I'm just going to decoupage over the front and the back and the side. And right here I'm just applying some napkin decoupage glue. And once I have the decoupage glue on there, I am taking the top layer of the napkin, and this is a piece of saran wrap, and this helps tremendously to protect against wrinkles in your napkin, and the saran wrap won't stick to the piece, so you can see how that looks really nice. And I'm just going to continue this around the rest of the jar. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm just taking a little bit of water on a paintbrush, and I'm going around this area where we're going to add the cap back on, and I'm just removing what I did not decoupage around this surface. So here is a little tip for you. This is a Martha Stewart paint that they don't make any longer. I've had these sitting around forever. They're beautiful. I wish they still made them, but they do not. I'm telling you that because I won't add links down below for them, because I'm pretty positive they just aren't available anywhere. So here's the reason I'm doing this. If you want to add a piece of clay over your decoupage, but you can't quite get the color exact, so you see this burgundy color here. Let's say I wanted to add a burgundy colored piece of clay in that I painted, but it does not match. Whoops, I made a little mistake down there. But it does not match what I'm working on. What you can do is you can add your own similar colors over the napkin carefully. So you see I have a fine artist's paintbrush, and I'm just putting little dabs of my own paint in here. Then when I add the clay accent that is painted the same color, it will just look completely natural. This is one of the hot glue pieces that I used white chalk paint over. Now I'm painting it with a light colored pink. So I added a pearly top coat finish over the jar. Now, thanks to video, it's dry, and what I'm going to do is show you how I attach the hot glue piece. And because that hot glue piece is flexible, I was just able to add hot glue to the back of it, put this on here where I wanted to, and it dried pretty quickly. You can see how it will conform to any shape right there. And I'm using that same glue gun with the pointed tip. I'll have a link down below for this gun because you really do want a glue gun with a very pointed tip. And I'm using a rubber band here because I'm going to add E6000 to this piece, because that hot glue will dry right away, but the E6000 will take a lot longer to dry. So I'm going to add all of this together. I've messed up the piece and I put it on upside down, and then I took it off and I got glue all over the place. So you might see some imperfections in this when I'm all done, but I'm not worried about it. This was more a practice piece to show you how to work with these molds and the different mediums. And now I have finally one more trick to show you, and to me this was the most exciting thing I've found in a while. This is the thinnest mold out there, and when you try to use air dry clay in it, even if you freeze it, no matter what you do, it's really hard, if not impossible, to get it out in one piece. What I'm using here, and you can get it from my links below or your local hardware store, is an acrylic silicone caulk, C-A-U-L-K. So you spread the caulk into the pattern. You see it's pretty messy. Now I'm going to show you, I said the plastic tool that you use for clay. I think it might be a rubber tool that you use for the clay. But what you do is you, with gloved fingers, some people don't use gloves. I don't know if it's toxic or not. I just didn't like getting this sticky stuff all over me. So what I'm doing is I am pressing this caulk into this super fine mold. Now I'm taking the rubber tool and I am scraping away the excess, and I'm taking the excess and adding it into the rest of the mold. And you do want to make sure you take a baby wipe. Don't use any chemicals over this. A baby wipe is about as strong as you can get. Take a baby wipe and go over your mold to get rid of that little bit of it's kind of a haze that's left behind. And now I'll show you, because this has been drying for 24 hours, so I did it at about 10 in the morning, and then I waited until 10 a.m. the next morning, and look how easily this peels out. Look how beautiful it is. Now you may notice that this is a different section of the mold, and I did this for the sake of time, so the other piece came out just as beautifully as this one did, but I just wanted to show you, look at how pretty that is. And it is the caulk. It's a combination of silicone and acrylic caulk. So you cannot use the strictly silicone one, and you have to make sure it says the silicone caulk acrylic on it. And this is a different mold, and I'm showing you what happens when you don't remove that little bit of haze. It can mess up the definition of your piece. It can mess it up a lot. And I don't really recommend this caulk method when you're using a deeper or thicker mold, because It takes 24 hours for it to dry in the very thin mold, and I kept it near a heat source right by the heat vent. And I had another mold that was a lot thicker, and I waited a day and a half to remove that one, and I messed it up because it wasn't ready yet and it just didn't come out right. So you want to make sure you probably stick to the very, very thin molds when you're using the acrylic caulk. And here's how the jar finally came out, and you can see that I've added some glitter, I've added some pearls. I'm just not crazy about how this looks, but I made it more for my cat, who has become very fussy in her old age, and her food will go in here, one of her 3 different flavors. And that piece on top, I believe it's also a hot glue gun mold, and the butterfly is air dry clay, and you can see I made a few little mistakes on this, but you can see how I use the acrylic silicone caulk on this outline piece here and the hot glue on the mold piece up on the top. So guys, I hope you found this helpful going forward with your decoupage. You can now work with some of these air dry clays. Don't forget to find me on Facebook and like and follow the page, because I notify you whenever I put a video up on there. And I hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for tuning in, thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys soon with another video. Take it easy, guys.